Now we move on to item 9, which is thank you very much for your willingness and your information. You've done a great job. Thank you. And thank you, John. Now we move into what has actually been some really good news, a 6-month report, Q2 performance report. Of course, it's looking backwards, and look, if you could look through a glass ball, you know, we'd be thinking fantastic. But I would like to, just before we start, draw attention to the executive summary points 4, 5 and 7, showing a really positive financial outcome. But Ross and David, no, that's not, Ross and John. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So John and I will talk to the group results for the quarter, and we'll pass over to David Gurney and others to talk about the parent performance and some items within that. So as the Chair has said, this is backward looking. This is the financial performance for the group for the 6 months to the end of December. I think it's useful to think about, as you had a discussion with Eden Park, think about, well, what is the situation you've been through previously? What's the current state of council's finances as you go towards uncertain territory going forward? So with that in mind, sorry, we can go to the next.
It's all right, I'll do it for you.
Yeah, thanks. So looking at the capital delivery for the group for the 6 months to December, it was a very solid result, a significant ramp up in CapEx delivery, really. So compared to the same period for the group 6 months earlier, 337 million more capital projects delivered. There's almost a 40% increase year on year for the same period. And compared to budget, that was basically in line with budget. So that was with City Rail Link investment included, about 99% of the overall budget delivered for the group, which is quite a significant change from in the past. We're actually been fully delivering the capital program over that period. So significant investment in City Rail Link, but also across Auckland Transport, Watercare, and within the parent, you'll hear later, around the water quality projects and the America's Cup program. So just moving on to the operating performance for that 6 month period. So again, it was a very strong, a period of very strong performance. So we had direct expenditure, so that's our staff and other controllable costs without interest and depreciation. Basically the spend being on budget, more or less, but the revenue for the group being 7% higher than budget. So that was, a number of factors. Watercare revenue was strong, some of the Auckland Transport revenues were strong, and the regulatory income from building resource consents was particularly strong over that period. So that's where we've been. So we move to the next one, which is around debt. I'll ask John to talk about the debt and treasury position.
Thanks, Ross, and through you, Chair. So net debt as at 31 December was 9.2 billion. And that was up significantly on the 30 June year end, up by 547 million. And that largely reflects the solid delivery on the capital investment program. Net debt to total assets remains about 17%, same as the year end projection. And if we look at our core debt to revenue ratio, it is at 31 December, that was sitting at 245% against a policy limit of 265%. And under our year-end projection of 253%. Our credit ratings remain as they were, AA Standard & Poor's and AA2 from Moody's, both on stable outlook.
So this is the last slide for the group. This is the group FTE picture. So as at 30 December, there were 11,100 FTEs for the group. So an increase over that period, over that 6 months, of just under 300 for the group. About half of that is within the parent. A large chunk of that is seasonal workforce. So you think lifeguards, holiday parks, some of those seasonal variations. Also some seasonal increases in RFA and Watercare, the summer intern program. Also Watercare has taken on a few extra people related to the work they're doing for the Waikato District Council. So that's kind of the overview of the group performance. Happy to take any questions, and if not, we'll move on to the parent.
Thank you, gentlemen. First question, Councillor Cooper.
So I'm not sure whether this will under the parent or not, but it's just the comment around the fact that we were down on DCs because we delayed payment, we changed the payment mechanism for good reason to increase housing stock. But with a signalled recession, what will be our ability to actually get that delayed payment, do you think? Do you think this will affect us, people meeting those commitments, as well as the issue of possibly less building consents and less construction?
That's a, I guess, very difficult question to answer. Yes, I guess there is, there's uncertainty in terms of the economic outlook, which means uncertainty for new development activity, and does that create issues for people that have already started building to make their payments over time? Those are all sort of areas of uncertainty going forward.
And so that will be put into our forward planning contingency in terms of the fact that even though people might have already built houses, there may be difficulties in actually receiving for the DCs for the already built homes.
That's something we'll have to think about when we get into our forward budgets in due course.
Right. Any other questions? Oh, yeah, Bishop?
Yeah, this is kind of a surreal discussion because we're looking back. Looking back, it becomes increasingly pleasant compared to looking forward. But obviously, congratulations on the way in which the budget has been managed, and you've got us in a strong position. My question might be an unanswerable one, but given the strong position we're in, to what degree of cushioning does that give us as we look forward to what will undoubtedly be a recessionary period? We don't know how long, and will result in obviously a drop in revenue from our side as things like building consents slow down, etc.
Yeah, through you, Chair. So if I look at what we have in place at the moment, if you look at our debt to revenue, we're currently at 245% against our policy limit of 265%. That gives us debt headroom in dollar terms of just over $800 million. Also, from a debt management point of view, we do have in place between 1.2 and 1.3 billion of committed but undrawn bank lines with 10 banks. So that does give us access to additional funds as well.
And sorry, just a supplementary through you, Madam Chair, that liquidity, access to liquidity, it's spread out over a number of banks, obviously, I think 10 or a dozen. Yeah, how secure is that liquidity now, given the change in circumstances that we're looking at?
Through you, Chair, I mean, it's secure as long as the banks are still in existence.
Well, that's pretty secure then, we hope. We hope.
No? Right, now we move then to the parent. We've got David. Kia ora.
Sorry about that. It's pretty much a continuation of the solid performance you've seen in the group results. So I'll start with... Sorry, can you move it on to and to the next slide as well? So capital performance, as you see with the disruption around the city, there's a lot of capital work going on. So far, up until December the 31st, we delivered $294 million worth of CapEx. That's $58 million more than last year and represents 87% of our program up to that point. So it's a very, very strong capital delivery performance. It's driven mainly out of strong progress in America's Cup and water quality projects, so that's a great result. Moving on to the operational performance. Okay, so we have a result at 31st of December of $6 million favourable against our net direct expenditure. Most of that's driven out of increased revenue in the regulatory area, given they've been doing higher than expected volumes of consents as well as more complex consents. Expenditure in the regulatory area has also gone up because of that extra volume. But because of a lot of the work we've done in productivity gains in that area, things such as the scheduling tool they've put in place, the inspections app, those costs haven't gone up enough to offset the revenue, so we've had a net positive result, which is great to see. We've also been seeing some savings in the organisational design work that we've been putting in place. Up to December the 31st, there were $5.5 million worth of savings coming from some of those changes. 4 million or so of which came from the finance division and the changes that have happened there, an extra $1 million coming from people and performance. So those changes are resulting in savings which will hopefully continue on. Okay, in terms of our staff, FTEs, at the end of the year, we saw the expected peak in FTEs that we normally see, 6,700 staff. That's mainly from the seasonal workers at that peak. That's tracked down. So as expected, we're now down, well, as at the end of February, we're at 6,655 staff, and we're managing that FTE count actively so that it stays within the cap at year end. Our performance measures, we achieved the 19 out of the 30 that were measured. We're still not hitting our performance targets in the regulatory area. However, of those measures, most of them are improving. There's a slight issue of the noise control measure, but staff are looking into that and seeing, they're looking at customer feedback to see where we can improve and hopefully lift that customer satisfaction with the noise control services area. One highlight from the performance measures that I just wanted to point out is the graffiti. 96% of the assets that we surveyed were graffiti free. That's the best result since 2011, so I thought that was something in particular to point out. Just in terms of the highlights, I'm going to invite Mark Denver and Rod Aitken come up soon to take us through what was pretty much the most significant event of the quarter, which was the Sky City fire and our response to that. I think what we'll hear from them is we responded really well, and so that gives us a little bit of confidence looking forward to this next crisis that we have to manage in terms of coronavirus. So I'll invite them up soon. Some other highlights just from the report. We launched a digital platform to report maintenance issues. What that does is it means it makes it a lot easier for members of the public to report problems, and it also takes load off our customer call centre because, of course, they're not calling the complaints through or the maintenance issues through. And it also, because it's linked to My Auckland, means that our customers can now also track online how we're responding to those issues they're raising. So there's a nice piece of technology that we launched. We also entered into a long-term partnership with EcoGas to process our weekly food scraps. It's quite a nifty process, actually. It produces biogas, which will then power greenhouses. It enriches the soil as part of the process, so it's a nice way of contributing to a sustainable food supply. So quite like that neat little value chain that we've got going on. And all in all, one of the I guess macro measures that we look at in terms of how well we're doing is the media sentiment scores. And again, we've achieved the highest score that we've achieved in December, 55%. So that gives us a general kind of feel of how I guess the general public, the media, are looking at us. So that's good news too. But now I'll hand over to Rod and Mark Denver to talk about the response to the Sky City fire.
Thank you, David. Puts us in a very good financial situation so far. Thank you. Gentlemen.
Through the chair. What I'd like to take you through very quickly is just really, I suppose, how as an organisation we cope with a fairly interesting event right across the road. The first part is, we played a role really, so as you can see from this slide, lots of agencies involved. We quite rapidly stood up our crisis management team, which was really looking at, as an organisation, how we were responding, especially due to the fact that we urgently needed to close some of our central precincts down. as the proximity to the fire. And I've got to say, one of the most surreal events I had through the course of that was a phone call from the fire brigade. There was lots of concern about the floating cars in the bottom of the basement knocking into the actual infrastructure. Trying to figure out what kind of answer you'd have to those types of problems. What I would say is the communication that I think that the organisation went through, its ability to handle a major incident, was absolutely tested to the maximum. One of the real key things that came from the organisation was fast and rapid implementation of its business continuity plans. I'd be fair to say we learned a lot through that process, which again I think has put us in fairly good stead for where we are today. I'll just into the next slide. Just really talking a little bit about, I suppose, how the organisation responded. Very rapidly, having emptied the central police precincts, lots of staff then relocated to some of our other facilities outside of the CBD. I really want to comment on workplace strategy, which is part of the corporate property team and ICT working together to provide a more agile workspace for our staff. I think the planning and the work that had already been undertaken in that program of work absolutely set us up for the ability to move very rapidly. We had 2,200 people across those first 2 days working from home with no downtime. They were able to continue functioning within their roles. You'll also see that 70% of the central base staff moved out into the wider precinct. All through that process, we were quite lucky. We managed to keep all of the services that the community were relying on. You know, we had no outages, and the system stayed up and running nicely. I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions, people? Councillor Walker.
A general question, and maybe more of a plea. I note the reference to the climate impact statement, and I read the small section, quite small section, under other focus areas. Given the imperative of achieving the 1.5% reduction in to meet our Paris commitments. Is it possible to have more comprehensive reporting through this mechanism? Because obviously it goes directly to council and the group, and there are significant financial implications in terms of our investments. If, for example, we're putting money into projects that are locking us into increasing emissions as compared to not. And quite obviously, I pick up on the really encouraging situation around was it eco-gas, which is marvellous. I mean, that's great.
Okay, it's something we'll consider. I think climate, it's a key strategic focus area, so we'll have a look at that for you.
Thank you.
Right, thank you. Your Worship.
Yeah, thank you very much for this, and I think it was a good effort by council over that period of time. You mentioned we had 2,200 people working from home, continuing their roles over that period. That was for a period of, what, a couple of days?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. Obviously, that could be quite promising in terms of our ability to do so again if COVID-19 gets worse. What lessons do we learn from that period that we might apply for the future?
Some very good lessons through the chair. We've already scaled up at the moment to enable around about 6,500 of our staff to be able to work from home as of today. We're already, I suppose the best lessons we learned was where we needed extra attention in the way we were managing, I suppose, the entire system and the way we were looking after our people. Yeah, we have. I know there is an item coming up around COVID-19, and I'm happy to talk at that in that item as well. But we are quite prepared now with the ability for people to work remotely. We are looking alongside with corporate property about how we use the footprint that we have today with social distancing in mind. We do have numbers of our back office staff who are still tied into working in one of our properties, so we are looking to see how we manage that portfolio. But if we do get to a scenario where we do need to, I suppose, go into full lockdown, at the moment we're pretty advanced on our planning on what that would look like.
And just a supplementary to that, the IT system could cope, as you said, 6,500 people could work from home. That's almost our entire staff, actually, isn't it? But the IT system can cope, and you can give the support necessary for people working in that environment.
Yes, absolutely. We know we can scale that up to about 10,000 people. At the moment, we've only gone to 6.5, and it's a 24-hour turnaround. We believe we can scale that up again. We are looking at the critical systems that the council would, or services that the council would like to continue to run. From an IT perspective, I'm looking at my staff who support those, and we are wrapping extra, let's say, caution and protection around those people.
Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, Madam Chair. My question is one I always ask, and that's to the OPEX budget for the parent, and how much of that, of the surplus of that, goes into the CapEx. So we always borrow less than what our total CapEx budget is. It's normally a percentage. What is that number this time for this first 6 months? Do we have that?
Top of the head, the half-year results to December, there was an operational surplus of 700 million, so that was actually the money that could be diverted through to actually fund other uses such as capital expenditure. Yep.
Okay.
That was across the group, though. Mm.
Large group.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just through you, a question around the Auckland Emergency Response Unit in the exercise. It sounded like things went smoothly, but were there any, with having that unit put to test, were there some learnings that we actually took from that we've been able to implement as an improvement?
Again, through the chair. So I'm not part of that particular group, but I know that they have had lessons learned alongside the CMT, which is the crisis management team. We have actually gone out quite formally back into the business around the BCPs and how the business has responded to go and find those learnings, so we can actually, make sure we're instituting any learnings from those.
Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I was planning to ask this question around the COVID item later, but I think it might be important to bring it up now. Item D here, it says we're in a strong financial position, significant debt headroom. That's fantastic. The question that I have is that it is so important for people to know that. So what is our comms plan? How are we getting that out to people?
Well, I guess this report's an important part of that. I know that there's our Auckland article, I think, that will be released after this. Sorry, Madam Chair, you might know.
I'm going to say you're quite right. There will be, following this meeting, there will be a media statement around that.
Right.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Hills.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And obviously, feels a bit weird asking all these questions when everything kind of doesn't exist as much right now. But I guess, obviously staff and their well-being is the number one thing. But if we are making financial decisions, depending on how long this lasts, and it's about the long term and about climate and about everything else, are we ensuring that we're not making knee-jerk decisions? The things like working from home, that's fantastic, 6,500. But if there are investment decisions we could be tweaking to make these long-term changes regardless of what happens. So there's more flexibility. We're not requiring more and more building space. We're not requiring more and more people to drive to or travel to one place every day. I know we're in an emergency kind of situation today, but over the next couple of months, as we can look with a bit more clarity, are you thinking of how, if we are having to make big changes in our spending, if they are long-term, because we've done things forever, but we kind of need to wipe out what we have done and move forward. So I'm just making sure that we're thinking long term, even in this kind of very, very difficult space for everyone.
Through the chair, I'll just do a quick intro and then I think Rod will be a good answer to that. But again, the workplace strategy that corporate property and IT are working on absolutely has that long-term view about the changing nature of work and therefore the ability for people to be more flexible and what that means from a corporate property footprint. That's absolutely part of the day-to-day conversation that we're having today about whatever we do in response to COVID-19, that we've got a view of what that looks like, for when we come through the end of this process. But I think Rod's probably better to...
Sorry, through the chair. I think there's a couple of things I would say is that there's two aspects to this from our perspective. There's the physical space and the tools, so that's like our workspace and our ICT. And I think we're in the right game on that. We're doing really well. In fact, we might take this opportunity to accelerate those works. So, for example, if there were less people in the workspace, there would be less disruption for people to actually improve the resilience in the workspaces. So we might actually accelerate those works. But the original tenets around the workspace, around the fit-out changes, around the technology upgrades that are self-funded through the program, still stand true. As it regards to our people experience and our staff, that's something, of course, we're very focused on through this, that we provide a good experience for our staff and we get them into a mindset around working in more flexible ways. And so the tenets around that still stand true. And in fact, through the fire event and through this now emerging event, that's kind of amping up. So we're being very mindful about our approach to that, about how we communicate to staff, and that's part of a crisis response that through Ian Maxwell that's being coordinated. So I suppose the answer is yes, we have all of those things in mind. The plan from a workplace and technology perspective still stands true, but we're looking to perhaps even accelerate our response as this event comes through.
Thank you. Councillor Casey.
It's a question for David. David, it's something you had in one of your slides up there, but also in your report is paragraph 17, which I don't really understand, but I'd like some more explanation about. I'm talking about full-time equivalents, and in the report you say that the increase was offset by, and I quote, a significant reduction in staff from the finance division. Can you tell me a bit more, like how many, what level and why? That'd be a good start. So the work still needs to be done. Are we doing it smarter, or are we offloaded it somewhere else?
So I can't give you the breakdown of the actual FTE reductions, but around the organisational design work, it's about looking at the way that we structure each of our divisions. We take into considerations things like span of control, the optimal supervisory levels that we need, and that helps us reorganise in a way that means that we can continue service provision at a good level, but it's far more efficient. So the results of that work were, as I said, $5.5 million savings up until the 31st of December. In terms of the redundancies, up until December the 31st, there were 140 people made redundant at a cost of $7 million. But of course, the long-term savings flowing from that will offset that in time. I can get more information prepared if you want more breakdowns.
All right, Councillor. Councillor Bartley.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair, through you. It's good to hear about the accelerating stuff regarding the workplace and COVID, because I cannot help but notice how we're still seated like everything is normal. So is it okay to risk our health and they're okay in the public gallery, if they're seating? So just wanted to say that. But my question is around D. I don't understand the debt headroom thing, when my understanding is that we can't borrow because we're almost at our credit ratio limit. Yeah, so 260. So dumb question, but going to ask it.
Okay, I'll refer this to John, who's coming up.
Just while he's coming up, I did ask you to be moved. I don't know what happened, but I did ask us to be moved a bit further.
Your elbow, I think, councillor, you meant your elbow. Thank you, yes.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. So our debt policy limit is at 265%. So that's debt to revenue, keeping that ratio at or below 265%. As at 31 December, we were at 245%. So we have that 20% of headroom, and that equates in dollar terms at around $800 million.
All right, yeah. Yes, it is.
Yeah,
It
but
is.
can we just clarify, that's short-term headroom, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because the 245 is due to go up to 265 within the space of, within 3 years, probably 2 years.
Or not, depending on what happens.
Yeah, through you, Chair. So based on the modelling pre-COVID-19, it had us going up to 265% in 2 or 3 years. That is correct.
Right.
But that assumes an expenditure pattern before COVID-19.
And from that last LTP, yeah. All right, councillor, so all right till now. Councillor Cooper.
My understanding is, what you didn't say is, 265 is a self-imposed limit, 270 is the legal limit over which. So my understanding has always been that 5% between 265 and 70 is then again another real emergency headroom if we really had to use it. So the 265 is self-imposed. I'm not suggesting we should, but given the difficult situation we may, and if we don't get a government council package, which would be very welcome, that...
Yeah. Yes.
Through you, Chair, you're correct, the 265 is self-imposed. The limit we've always talked about through Stanley & Poor's is at 270%. So that gives you another additional 200 to 250 million. Now, just to complicate things a little bit further, Stanley & Poor's methodology has been recently changed, and they have taken out explicit reference to 270%. So that's gone. Now, that doesn't mean that we can go miles beyond 270% without having any rating action, but it's something over the coming months that we'll have a close look at and see what, if any, additional flexibility we might have.
Yes, just reminding everybody that we're actually talking about what has been to the 31st of December, all right? So what happens next is a subject of further debate, not necessarily right now, all right? I would like to move the recommendations just before, okay, we've got a couple of questions to go. Do I have a seconder, Deputy? Thank you. Councillor Filipaina.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I just want to ask a question on D as well, following Councillor Bartley's question. Why is it in there? Because me looking at D, it leaves it open-ended because it's just telling us we were strong position on the 31st of December 2019. My question to that is, what position are we in now? I'm just trying to sort of see about combining something to the effect that we were in a strong position 31st, but staff will come back to the Finance and Performance Committee with any updates in regards to our position. From my perspective, it's open-ended.
I'll answer that. The reason is we are in an interesting time, and I suppose it's stating the fact that at the 31st of December, we're in a good financial position. We will deal with what happens next in the next item and potentially this afternoon and day by day. But actually, what we want to say is we went close to the wire at the 31st of December. We were okay, so no need for panic.
Understand.
We've got some headroom.
I understand that.
That was the reasoning behind the resolution.
Having the ability to, so then when the public read it, that we will be updated in regards to any of our positions moving forward as a result of the pandemic we're in. I don't want to put all that in, but the fact that we will be updated just leaves it open-ended.
That's what E says, give or take. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying, combining.
So let's get on to where we're going, shall we? So we've got a mover and a seconder. I think I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour say aye. Against, carry. I know I can come back, councillor, that we have to let Ian go for an urgent meeting at midday, and he is part of the extraordinary business. So thank you very much, gentlemen. And we'll come back